this type of stimulation. We experimented with a type of stimulation, me and a group of good friends of mine. And gosh, did it feel good. Now, this was a situation that we were not going to announce to parents because it was sort of like, a special kind of secret discovery thing. And so we just had this experience with sharing some pleasure when I was about 6 years old. And as the years went on, I discovered a way of sharing pleasure with female human beings. And gosh, did it feel good. And it was wonderful and it was exciting. And it was not something that we shared with our parents. So I lived with this secrecy life, even through the season of being married. And I was familiar or comfortable with living my life, but having one secret area that was sort of like not shared, a facade. There was this area that was a facade. It was a hidden area. And that actually caused falsehood, lying, and deception to live inside of me at certain times. I mean, you could have called me overall, a liar if you wanted to. But that was not my general operating procedure. It was just a thing that I had built a justification for. And there were things that I would avoid because I was living in this certain environment of arousal and pleasure, and I would avoid. This is not something that was just part of my general conversation with people. Not at all. Now, after my big development. Okay. When I was 36 years old, I had a girlfriend. And that girlfriend had a library. And in her library were books about self-control for men and women. And she and I started doing these exercises where our feel good, we would go so far and then personally, and then we would stop. And then in the teaching, it's like, do that 3 times in a row. Go so far, not too far, and stop. Don't go too far. Go so far and stop. Do it 3 times in a row. Do it 6 times in a row. Do it 9 times in a row. Do it up to 36 times in a row. And you practice as if it's a sport. You practice and really become good at just saying no. And one thing that was affected, that I was trained in, was the Kegel muscle, which is your stop peeing muscle. Pretend you're standing or squatting right now and you're releasing urine, and do the thing that you do to stop releasing the urine. You're affecting your Kegel muscle. Well, I was trained in the drawing up the Kegel muscle. And the teacher said, if you learn how to close your anus, if you learn how to close your Kegel muscle, you will open your interaction with God. If you say no to yourself, you will say yes to God. And this was just a teaching. And my girlfriend and I did this teaching, and this is what she said. This intimacy is so amazing. This intimacy is so wonderful. Now that we've learned how to control ourselves, we can actually be together in intimacy for such a long time and really sit in it and enjoy it. And she said, I feel like we shouldn't even be doing this if we're not married. This is such a deep, absolutely wonderful way of being together physically. And I agreed with her. She and I were both in tears. And at that point, I had had a failed marriage. I felt truly sad that I had failed my best friend in life, and I was in a state of a lot of despair about myself. I had a lot of spirits of depression and suicide on me. And there were many other details that I would tell about that particular relationship. It was a wonderful relationship, so educational, tons of music, tons of good cheer and kindness in that relationship with me and my friend that learned self-control exercises. And then we set our relationship aside, and soon after that, I actually submitted to dealing with these Christianity people, and a lot of the things that I had to submit to were horrible. Some of the things were just like absolutely, I knew that they were wrong. But at the same time, I was being told by the highest spirit, you're in a training program, don't complain. When you hear something that's wrong, put a note in your notebook, go home into your theological library, which was provided by my mother, and study how you would present that thing completely differently and better than that horrible way that it was just presented, so that people are inspired and peaceable and not adversarial and prideful. And so I was getting this coaching and this training, and this was a 24-year process. This was long, 1994 to 2018. In 2018, I was told, no more. No more standard churchianity, no more standard convocations, only when I call you in a special way. So, back to the physiological. Okay, so when I was 6 years old, I was trained in sharing arousal. I began sharing arousal with women not long after that. And for a long period of time, I had a secret life of enjoying arousal, even outside of the knowledge of my wife, because I was just used to having this, secret area of my life, and it contributed to negative parts of my own character, hiding things and lying about things, which has been cleansed. So after my relationship with with my friend where I learned self-control, then I was literally invaded by God, and I know that God kind of had the setup of that relationship to close my, what you would call sex addiction, or close off the spirits of power and control over my mind and my heart and my life, with this, addiction to secret satisfying and pleasure. And it was like a horrible, devastating, problematic part of my life. And I cannot overemphasize how much hurt that it brought in my life and in other people's lives. Never had a child. If I had had a child, I might have come face to face with this problem. But I was hanging out with people who were all justifying the same problem, basically. So I needed a completely different people atmosphere where there were different spirits in control. So it was some years, 94, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It was 4 or 5 years into my interaction with the churchianity people that I met friend Farai. And in the first moment when God crashed in on me, in the very first moment, I said, make me into the father that I needed. I love my father who adopted me and raised me. And I got to meet my birth father when I was 40 years old. And I bless him. And he was a poor little kid that was thrown into the Merchant Marines. And he literally learned how to drink and not be effective, and to have many intimate relationships and not have a conscience about that. There were two areas of my birth father's life where he was literally sold out to dark powers, the power of alcohol and the power of what you would call promiscuous or bad form intimacy, a lack of respect for the single marriage covenant for life and the intimacy in that. And those two areas, he was just in bondage. But in other areas of his life, he was one of the neatest people that you ever want to meet. Very inspiring, very fascinating teacher, great musician, and just like a friendly person. So I have no condemnation towards either of my fathers, the ones that I physically came from, the Bowden clan, the Scottish blood. And my mother was Clan Graham, and my father was Clan Bowden. And they didn't even know that. They came together, and then they were never together again. And so I have a funny thing of posting a Scottish flag from time to time to remind people that it's a Scottish blood, and it could also be the 10 tribes. It could be the tribe of Naphtali that I'm actually from, the Hebrew tribe of Naphtali. So, what else? Okay, that's about enough. So this is an introductory picture, and I called out to God and I said, please make me into the daddy that I needed when I was 3, 4, 5 years old. There's all these jokers ahead of me teaching people and stuff, and they're not really doing a good job, and I'm really upset with the way that they're just casting aside many of the interesting things that Jesus taught. They're not putting the whole picture together, and they're not gathering together as a group of friends with honesty, with talking about the demons that are still operating. Jesus actually says, when you get saved, more tricky, powerful demons are going to stick to you. Worse demons are going to stick to you when you're saved. Nobody ever told me that. Worse demons. So discerning bad spirits and discerning bad behavior is literally the most important thing of our whole lives. Because these spirits go underground. They make it think that you, oh, well, this is part of my cat. Oh, I don't do that, and I don't do this. And I don't hang out with blah, 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 blah. And the voice that's coming out is actually a demonic voice that they've learned from their peer group. And now I'm so used to sitting around hearing people making comments that slander other people. And they don't even know what they're saying. They're actually speaking lies, and they're speaking word curses over themselves and over others. And they're following people, and they're in habits with other people who are in bad habits. And they're actually doing things that are dangerous. If you're going into prayer, you do these things first, and they're not doing those things. If you're going to try to talk to God, first you need to do certain things, and they're not doing those things. So they're actually getting themselves in bad trouble. There's all this junk going on in churchianity, and I have been asked to leave it, and now I care the most about people in rehab centers and teenage kids aging out of foster care that need to learn. I mean, some of these teenage kids have their own children, and they need to learn how to just live day-to-day life in an apartment and run a household. My goodness. I'm thinking about Kristen, and I'm thinking about that lady in California that's got that handful of kids. She is having such a tough time from time to time. Bless her, God. Okay, so now what you're about to hear in this series, if you're still with me, is how to bless the women first and the men and boys as well. Okay? We are a group of friends. You're one age, I'm another age. But we're friends. You are in God's presence, and your young life is actually being watched by God. Are the powers of an elder different than a younger? Yes, they are. You guys have powers that I don't have. You have strengths that I don't have. But you have weaknesses in areas where I have strengths, which is wisdom, planning, storytelling, experiences, etc., etc. And we are a team. We are friends of different ages and experiences. We're just stuck in these bodies and they only last for so long. And you have had horrible circumstances come to you, and you have had wonderful circumstances and situations come to you, and we are all coming together at the table. Even the littlest children actually have powers and strengths. And if they are welcoming the Holy Spirit, they will be getting instructions from the Holy Spirit for all of us in ways where we're just blown away. Mom and Papa, I think we're supposed to visit Uncle so-and-so. And then Mom says, oh my gosh, I was having dreams about him the past 2 nights. We need to go right now, right now. And the child realizes that the Holy Spirit in them has just guided the whole family. And they say, Holy Spirit, keep talking to me so I can help my family. If you have a picture or a revelation, everybody. There are some people that cut off the children and don't allow them to have communion and consider them to be like, undeveloped characters. Oh my goodness. Jesus says, let the little children come to me. And I'll leave you with that note. The next thing that you will hear is this wonderful plan to cut out the problems that I had in my youth, to become a family that just discusses both the feel-good and the flow in a simple way where we check in on one another and we're finding out if we're doing okay. The goal, be single like Jesus if you can. And even if you're married, you know what? Sometimes you feel very single. And that's okay. So practicing being single like Jesus is really wonderful. Find the Myles Munroe, Myles Monroe, Myles Munroe teaching on the value of singleness. The value of singleness. He teaches about be single first. Be a great single person first and be real with your friends and with God about everything. And then you will be a wonderful marriage person if you want to share your body with somebody. But if you haven't learned how to be really wonderful single with your friends, real with your friends, Chris, Jeff, Jane, this is actually for you. My heart inside is you 3 people are like some of the most important people in my life. Bill, Juliet, Colin, Elena, Adrian. This is all for you too. So, here we go. This is how to just be real about the 2 things. The flow of the man, the flow of the woman, which is a different flow. The flow of the man is surrounded by comfort and very, very satisfying stimulation. The flow of the man. The flow of the woman is surrounded by discomfort, pain, and just a measure of trouble. That makes men and women very different. We are secretly run by our own physiology. Our souls, our character, the character of the way that we handle ourselves is partly trained by the weird gift of our physiology. And this is where the fun starts. This is where we can be friends again. I don't care what you call our relationship, but I love my friends. And I want us all to be safe. Most importantly, I want us to raise a new generation that's real about both the feel-good and the flow, so that there isn't a secret life. I lived secret life trouble for 40 years. I just was beginning to learn at 40 years old. Peace be with you. Take check out the next one.